Sarah adjusted the rearview mirror, catching a glimpse of her 10-year-old son, Jacob, asleep in the back seat with Max curled beside him. The golden retriever's head lifted the moment the car slowed in front of their new house. A quaint two-story with a small white picket fence and a swing in the front yard. It looked like the kind of neighborhood where people waved at each other and barbecues happened every weekend. She hoped it was the fresh start they desperately needed. Jacob had been born deaf, and life hadn't been kind to either of them. But Max, his service dog, had changed everything. He was more than a pet. He was Jacob's protector, his independence, his ears. Max had been trained to alert Jacob to everything from fire alarms to doorbells to passing cars. The dog never left Jacob's side. As they unpacked boxes, Sarah felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years, until she noticed her son freeze at the top of the porch steps. Someone was watching them. Across the street, behind a lace curtain, a figure stood perfectly still. A woman in her late 50s with tightly pinned silver hair and a face that could curdle milk. She held a clipboard like a weapon, her eyes fixed not on Sarah, but on Max. The curtain twitched and closed. That night, Sarah got her first welcome. It wasn't a neighbor bearing cookies or offering help. It was a note, slid under her front door in thick, black ink. HOA Rule 14 bits. No pets over 25 wolves. Violators subject to immediate fines and removal. Sarah's stomach tightened. She read it again, then again. Her hands shook as she looked over at Max, sleeping beside Jacob's bed. He's not a pet. He's a lifeline. She thought about ignoring it, but something about the note, the blunt tone, the complete lack of warmth, chilled her. The next morning, she dropped a copy of Max's ADA service animal certification and a letter from Jacob's doctor into the HOA mailbox, just as the rulebook instructed. That should have been the end of it. But when she returned home from errands that afternoon, the folder was on her porch, torn open, the documents scattered across her welcome mat like garbage, written in Sharpie on the back of one page. Rules apply to everyone. No exceptions. That night, Sarah double-locked the doors. She kept the porch light on. Max slept restlessly, occasionally growling at the front window. She didn't understand it yet, but she would soon. This wasn't about a dog. It wasn't even about rules. It was about control. And someone had just decided Max didn't belong. The next few days were a blur of tense silence. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Each time she stepped outside, the same curtain fluttered across the street, that same woman's cold eyes behind it. Max seemed uneasy, constantly sniffing the air and staring at the house. Sarah had hoped she was imagining things, but the nagging sensation that something was off wouldn't let go. Then came the letter. It was simple, too simple. A plain white envelope with no return address. Just the HOA emblem in the corner and a thick official seal that sent a shiver down Sarah's spine when she saw it. She opened it slowly, dreading what she would read. Dear homeowner, this is a final warning. According to HOA Rule 14 bits, dogs over 25 wolves are not allowed in the community. As per our records, your dog Max is in direct violation of this rule. Please remove him immediately. Failure to comply will result in legal action, including fines, removal from the property, and possible eviction. Sincerely, the Oak Ridge Heights Homeowners Association. Her fingers trembled as she reread the letter. The words blurred for a moment, and then the weight of them hit her. Eviction. Legal action. Sarah felt like the world had spun on its axis. This wasn't just about an HOA violation. This was personal. Max wasn't just any dog. He was Jacob's safety net, his lifeline. And the more she thought about it, the more Sarah realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. Linda, the woman across the street, was targeting them. But why? Sarah tried to stay calm. She walked across the street, her heart pounding as she approached Linda's house. The porch light flickered on as Sarah reached the gate. She knocked once, twice. No answer. A cold feeling crept up her spine. But just as she turned to leave, the door creaked open. Linda stood in the threshold, arms crossed, her expression as tight and unwelcoming as ever. "I got your letter," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Max is a service dog. He's not just a pet. He's registered, protected by law. The HOA rules don't apply to him." Linda's lips twisted into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I know the rules. All of them," she said, her voice chillingly calm. "And if your dog's causing a problem, we have every right to remove him. You're just making excuses." Sarah's chest tightened, the anger bubbling up in her throat. "He's not causing any problems. Max is." "Maybe you should read the rules more carefully," Linda interrupted, her voice cutting through the air. "I'm just doing my job." The door slammed shut before Sarah could respond. Back at home, Sarah was left staring at the closed door, her heart racing. This wasn't about rules. This was about something deeper, something darker. She felt it in her gut. Linda wasn't just following the HOA's bylaws. She was taking things into her own hands, and Max was her target. That night, Sarah sat in the living room, eyes locked on Max, who lay curled up at her feet. A horrible thought crossed her mind. What if this isn't just about the dog? What if it's about me? But before she could delve deeper into the thought, Jacob's voice cut through the silence. "Mom, why is Linda mad at Max?" Sarah didn't have an answer. The morning air was still when Sarah stepped outside to fetch the mail. It felt like any other quiet day in the neighborhood, except the nagging feeling at the back of her mind refused to let up. Linda's warning letter, the way she dismissed Max so casually, it all felt wrong. Still, Sarah had to believe it was over. The HOA had been forced to acknowledge Max's status as a service dog, and that had to be enough. They couldn't take him. Not legally. Not with all the proof she had. But when Sarah opened the gate to the backyard, she froze. The latch was broken. It hung loosely, swaying slightly in the wind. "Max," she called, her voice shaky. Max had always been so obedient. He never wandered far, never left Jacob's side. But as she stepped further into the yard, her heart slammed in her chest. He wasn't there. She ran inside, panic rising in her throat. "Jacob, where's Max?" she asked, her voice higher than she meant it to be. Jacob was sitting on the couch, his iPad in hand. He looked up, confused. "Max isn't in the backyard." "No," Sarah said, already grabbing her phone. "We need to find him. Now." Her fingers flew across the screen as she dialed the number for the local animal shelter, her mind spinning. Where could he have gone? Max never left the yard. He never strayed. This wasn't like him. "Hello," a voice answered. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. "I'm looking for my dog. He's a service dog, a golden retriever, and—" "Ma'am, are you the one with the dog that was brought in this morning?" The voice interrupted, its tone sharp. "What do you mean?" Sarah asked, her throat tightening. "Someone dropped off a dog matching that description. Came in just after dawn. No collar, no ID. Just a note saying it was found wandering around." Sarah's vision blurred. Dropped off. Wandering? There was no way. No way Max would leave. He couldn't. "Where is he?" she demanded, fear clawing at her chest. "We're holding him for now," the shelter worker replied. "But you'll need to come down and confirm the dog's identity." Without another word, Sarah hung up and grabbed her keys. "Jacob, stay inside," she called, her voice trembling. "I'll be back in a few minutes." But as she hurried to the car, a cold dread settled deep in her stomach. Something was off. She could feel it. The drive to the shelter was a blur, the streetlights casting long shadows as the world around her seemed to fall away. When she arrived, the place was eerily quiet, save for the soft hum of the fluorescent lights inside. The shelter worker led her into a back room where rows of cages stood, each with a dog in it. She scanned them quickly. None of them were Max. She felt her pulse quicken. Then, just as she was about to ask again, the worker motioned toward a cage in the far corner. There he was, Max. But something was wrong. Max's eyes were wide with confusion and fear. His fur was matted, his body tense. He was staring directly at the door, waiting for her. Sarah's heart twisted as she stepped closer to him, her breath catching. "Max," she whispered, her voice breaking. She opened the cage, and Max leaped into her arms, his paws shaking as if he didn't recognize her. The worker approached, but stopped short when she noticed Sarah's expression. "You're sure this is your dog?" Sarah nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. But as she looked around the shelter, she couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling of something deeper, darker at play. Who would do this? The drive home felt longer than it had any right to. Sarah couldn't shake the image of Max's wide, confused eyes as she pulled him from the cage, his body trembling in her arms. He was home, but something wasn't right. His usually joyful demeanor was gone. He hadn't even barked when she spoke to him, just stared at her as if asking why she hadn't come sooner. As Sarah parked in the driveway, her mind raced. Who would take Max? Why? And how could they have gotten into the yard without leaving a trace? She pushed those questions aside for the moment. Jacob needed her now. As soon as they got inside, she knelt down to Jacob's level, watching his face light up when he saw Max. The boy rushed to him, arms outstretched. "Max, Max, you're home," Jacob cried, hugging the dog with all the love in the world. Sarah could see the relief in her son's face, the weight of the last few hours lifting. For a brief moment, the world seemed normal again. But then she looked at Max. The dog lay still, barely moving. The question lingered. Why did it feel like something had changed? Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Sarah's pulse quickened. Who could this be? When she opened it, her stomach dropped. Standing on the porch was Linda, her eyes cold, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Behind her, the neighborhood stood in silent judgment, peering from behind curtains. "Is everything all right?" Linda asked, her voice saccharine sweet, too calm, too calculated. "I saw you leave earlier." I was concerned. Sarah's eyes narrowed. Concerned? About what? About Max, or about the fact that Sarah was still here at all? "I went to the shelter," Sarah replied, her voice icy. "Max is fine now, but I don't know how he ended up there." Linda's lips twitched slightly, but she said nothing, just waited. Sarah's gut told her something was off. "Why did you do it, Linda?" Sarah asked, stepping forward, her voice steady but laced with rising anger. "Why take him?" Linda's face didn't change, but Sarah saw the flash of recognition in her eyes, the flicker of someone caught in the act. For a long moment, there was silence, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Then Linda spoke, her voice cool and calculated, though there was a slight tremor beneath her words. "I'm just following the rules, Sarah. You knew the rules when you moved in. No dogs over 25 wolves. That's it. Max was a violation." "Max isn't a pet," Sarah said, her voice low but firm. "You took him because you wanted to take control. You've been doing this for years, haven't you?" Linda's eyes flicked to the side, her lips tightening. "What are you talking about?" "You've been targeting families with special needs," Sarah shot back, her voice gaining strength. "I found the records, the emails. You've pushed out 3 other families with service animals in the past year. Don't lie to me." Linda didn't flinch. Instead, she stepped back, her eyes hardening like a predator sensing its prey. "I didn't kidnap anyone, Sarah. I just took action where it was needed. The rules exist for a reason. You think your son and his dog are exceptions." A cruel smile curled on her lips. "There's no place for people like you here." The words hit harder than Sarah expected, but she didn't let it show. She didn't move, didn't blink. Instead, she met Linda's gaze with the full force of her resolve. "You took him," Sarah said softly, "and now you're going to pay for it." Linda raised an eyebrow, her cold demeanor never faltering. You think you can take me down with a couple of papers? Go ahead, file your lawsuit. You'll be out of here before you know it." The door slammed in Sarah's face before she could respond. Standing in the hallway, her hand still gripping the doorknob, Sarah took a deep breath. This was only the beginning. Max might be home, but the battle was far from over. And something told her that Linda wouldn't stop until she had won, no matter what it cost. The days after Linda's visit dragged on, but Sarah's resolve only grew stronger. She couldn't let this go. Not after everything. Not after seeing the way Linda had looked at her, the smug superiority in her eyes, as if she believed she was untouchable. Sarah paced around the house, a whirlwind of frustration. She kept telling herself she was doing the right thing, taking legal action, fighting for Max, fighting for Jacob. But the weight of Linda's words kept echoing in her head. "There's no place for people like you here." She couldn't ignore the truth any longer. Linda wasn't just trying to enforce the HOA rules. She was targeting people like Sarah and her son, families who didn't fit into her narrow view of what the neighborhood should look like. Max wasn't the first casualty of her crusade. And Sarah needed proof, something more than just gut feelings. That night, after Jacob had gone to bed, Sarah sat at her desk, pulling up every document she had about the HOA. She scanned the rules, highlighted the relevant sections, and then began searching online for anything that could help her build a case. It was exhausting work, but she knew she couldn't afford to stop. Linda had to be exposed. Hours passed, the only sound in the room the quiet hum of the computer and the occasional rustle of papers. Then she found it. A buried email from last year, one that had slipped through the cracks. It was a chain of correspondence between Linda and several other members of the HOA board. Sarah clicked it open, her pulse quickening as she read the first few lines. "We need to eliminate the families with special needs. They're causing disruption and making the neighborhood uncomfortable for the rest of us. We can start with the service dog families. Make the rules clear. They'll leave eventually." Her stomach twisted as she read on. The next message was even worse. "Get the dog removed first. If we need to get creative with the HOA rules, so be it. We don't need to give them a choice." Sarah's hands trembled as she scrolled through the emails, each one more damning than the last. Linda had been using the HOA as her personal weapon, systematically forcing families out by targeting their service animals. It was all there, proof, right in front of her. But there was more. The final email in the thread contained an attachment, a list of families, including their personal information, children's disabilities, and most horrifying of all, notes about their service dogs. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She printed everything she could, making sure to save copies. This was more than just a case against Linda. It was proof of a systemic effort to remove people who didn't fit Linda's perfect neighborhood image. The documents shook Sarah to her core. This wasn't about rules. This was about power, control. And Linda had been playing the long game. But what Sarah didn't expect was the next detail that stood out. At the bottom of the list was another name. Sarah Dalton. Linda had been keeping track of her from the start. Her stomach churned as she closed the computer, the full weight of what she had uncovered sinking in. Linda wasn't just after Max. She was after Sarah's family. And she'd already been planning this all along. Max, who had been a symbol of hope and strength for Jacob, was now part of a larger fight. A fight that had only just begun. The day of the trial arrived too quickly for Sarah's liking. Her heart thudded in her chest as she stepped into the courthouse, the weight of the legal documents she'd uncovered earlier still fresh in her mind. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected to feel so small under the harsh fluorescent lights, the walls of the courtroom towering over her. But she couldn't back down now. Not after everything she'd learned. The room was eerily quiet as she took her seat at the plaintiff's table, her lawyer by her side, his face a mask of determination. Across from them, Linda sat with her lawyer, her icy stare fixed on Sarah. It was as if the entire world had shrunk to just these two women. Sarah, the mother fighting for her son's future, and Linda, the woman who had orchestrated this twisted game from the start. The judge entered, the room standing in respect. As he settled into his seat, Sarah felt her stomach tighten. This was it, the moment where everything would either fall into place or shatter beyond repair. The case began. Sarah's lawyer presented their evidence first: photographs of Max, his service animal certification, and the emails Sarah had uncovered. The damning chain of messages between Linda and the HOA board was the cornerstone of their argument. It painted a clear picture of a calculated effort to target families with service animals, all led by Linda herself. But Linda's lawyer didn't waste any time. He immediately attempted to discredit Sarah's evidence, claiming that the emails were out of context, that the rules of the HOA had to be enforced for the good of the neighborhood, and that any accusations of malice were pure speculation. "Your Honor," Linda's lawyer said smoothly, "the defendant, Ms. Dalton, is simply trying to manipulate the situation. The rules are clear. The HOA has the right to enforce its policies. There's no personal vendetta against this family, no discrimination." But as Linda's lawyer spoke, Sarah noticed something strange. Linda wasn't looking at the lawyer, wasn't even paying attention to the proceedings. She was staring directly at Sarah, her eyes filled with cold malice. And that look, it sent a chill down Sarah's spine. The trial continued, each argument more heated than the last. The room was filled with sharp words, accusations, and counter-arguments. Sarah could feel the weight of Linda's gaze on her, like a predator sizing up its prey. It was clear Linda wasn't just fighting to win this case. She was fighting to crush Sarah, to destroy everything she had built. Then the unexpected happened. As Sarah took the stand, ready to tell her side of the story, Linda's lawyer leaned in, whispering something to her. Sarah's heart dropped. She couldn't hear what was said, but the way Linda's lawyer looked at her, it wasn't a look of concern or strategy. It was a look that said, "I know your deepest fear." And suddenly, the room felt colder. Sarah spoke with conviction, detailing the events that had led to this trial. How Max was not just a pet, but a lifeline to her son. She spoke of the emails, the cruel manipulation, and the twisted need for control. But as her words echoed in the courtroom, she couldn't shake the feeling that something else was coming. Something worse. As she finished her testimony, she felt a shift in the air. A low murmur spread through the room. The judge cleared his throat. "Ms. Dalton," he began, his voice slow, measured, "I just received new evidence in this case, a separate matter related to your personal background." Sarah froze. Her pulse raced as her lawyer exchanged a glance with the judge. "Is there anything you'd like to address before we proceed?" Her mind spun. What could this be? The room seemed to close in around her as the unexpected twist left her grasping for words. Had Linda somehow turned the tables, or was there something more sinister at play? The courtroom felt like it was spinning, the walls closing in on Sarah with every passing second. The judge's words echoed in her mind, a dull thud of dread. "I just received new evidence in this case." Her hands were clammy as she looked at Linda, who was seated across the room, her eyes gleaming with an unsettling satisfaction. Whatever this new evidence was, Sarah could feel that Linda had orchestrated it, and it wasn't good. She knew Linda wasn't done. There was always another layer to peel back. Her lawyer, a tall man with sharp features, stood up quickly and whispered something urgent to Sarah. "Stay calm. We'll deal with this." But how could she stay calm when the very foundation of her case was being shaken? What new evidence could there be? The judge cleared his throat once again, his voice steady. "Ms. Dalton, please take a seat." Sarah nodded numbly, walking back to the witness stand, her heart hammering in her chest. Her mind raced. Was this an attack on her character? Was Linda pulling out something from her past, something personal, to destroy her credibility? Her lawyer stood and addressed the judge. "Your Honor, we weren't made aware of this evidence beforehand. We request to see it before any further actions are taken." The judge raised a hand, signaling for the courtroom to settle. He turned his attention to the bailiff. who handed him a thick folder. With one swift motion, the judge opened it and pulled out a single document. It was a photograph. Ms. Dalton, this was submitted by the defendant's legal team, the judge said, holding the photo up for the room to see. The image hit Sarah like a punch to the gut. It was a photograph of her, taken years ago, standing in front of her old apartment. But the worst part wasn't the image itself. It was the man standing next to her. The man was a former therapist Sarah had worked with during a difficult time in her life, someone who had helped her through the aftermath of a traumatic incident when she was younger. The caption on the photo read, "Sarah Dalton with Dr. Mitchell Braden, a known mental health professional with a history of." Sarah's heart stopped. She could feel the blood drain from her face as her past, the one she had worked so hard to bury, was suddenly thrust into the light. The judge continued, "It seems there are allegations that you've been involved in questionable behavior in the past. This is part of a larger investigation into your mental health." Sarah's mind whirled. How did Linda get this? The therapist had been confidential, and their relationship had ended years ago. She had moved on. There was nothing to this, just a part of her life she had never discussed with anyone. But it didn't matter. In the eyes of the court, it painted her as unstable, a woman with a past she couldn't control, someone whose word couldn't be trusted. Linda's lawyer leaned in, his voice smooth as silk. "Your Honor, this photo and the context surrounding it are relevant to the case. Ms. Dalton's credibility is in question. How can she be trusted to care for her son when she's demonstrated an inability to properly handle her own mental health?" The room seemed to shrink around Sarah, every eye in the courtroom fixed on her. The weight of Linda's attack was suffocating. She could feel the walls closing in. The very thing she had feared was coming true. Her past, her most painful secret, was being used against her. But in the pit of her stomach, something else stirred, a fierce, quiet rage. Linda thought she had won, but Sarah wasn't done yet. Before the judge could continue, Sarah stood. The room went silent. "I have something to say." Sarah's voice rang out, stronger than she felt. "Yes, I have a past, a hard one, but it's made me who I am today. It's made me a mother who will fight for her son, no matter what." Her eyes burned with resolve as she turned toward Linda, who was sitting smugly, her lips curled into a grin. "You think this is going to break me? You think you can use my history to control me? Well, you're wrong." Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper, but it carried like a storm. "I'm going to expose you, Linda. All of it. You will not get away with this." The judge looked between them, clearly sensing the shift in the room. He motioned for both sides to calm down, but Sarah had already made her point. She had nothing to hide anymore. And the truth would soon come crashing down on Linda, no matter how hard she tried to bury it. The courtroom was thick with tension. Sarah's words still lingered in the air, echoing in her mind. "You will not get away with this." The challenge she'd thrown at Linda wasn't just a statement. It was a declaration. It was her final stand. The judge raised his hand, the gavel held high. "Order in the court." Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she sat back down. Linda's smug expression hadn't shifted. She sat there, arms crossed, as though she already had the outcome of this case in the palm of her hand. But Sarah wasn't going to let that happen. For a moment, the room was still, the anticipation nearly unbearable. But then something strange happened. Sarah's lawyer, who had been silent since the photo had been introduced, stood up with a file in his hand. His face was grim, but there was a glimmer of something else in his eyes, something almost victorious. "Your Honor," he said, his voice unwavering, "we'd like to present new evidence that directly contradicts what has been introduced today." The room fell silent as everyone turned toward Sarah's lawyer. Linda's eyes narrowed, and Sarah could feel the cold weight of her gaze. What did he have? Her lawyer stepped forward, holding up a second file. "This," he began, "is a complete record of Linda Foster's involvement with the HOA and the family she's targeted. This includes emails, personal notes, and even threats that she's made against other residents. And more importantly, it contains statements from multiple families who have come forward with their own accounts of being manipulated and forced out of the neighborhood. Sarah's breath hitched in her throat. She hadn't known how much her lawyer had uncovered. She hadn't expected this. But as he continued, the truth came flooding out. This is a pattern of abuse. Linda Foster has used her position in the HOA to intimidate, harass, and isolate families with special needs. She has actively sought to remove them from the neighborhood, creating a hostile environment for them and their service animals. Linda's face had turned pale, her lips pressed into a thin line. Her lawyer was visibly flustered, fumbling with his notes. But it was too late. The evidence was already on the table. Sarah's lawyer slid the final piece of the puzzle onto the judge's desk. And here is the most important piece of evidence. This document was just released through a public records request. It's a signed statement from Dr. Mitchell Braden, who has confirmed that Linda Foster was not only aware of Sarah Dalton's mental health history, but has also been actively using that information to manipulate the HOA's decisions. She's been using personal information from vulnerable families to further her own agenda. A collective gasp rippled through the room as Linda's lawyer stumbled backward, his face drained of color. Linda's perfect facade cracked for just a moment. The icy mask slipped, revealing the fury beneath. She stood up abruptly, her voice rising. But it was too late. "Your Honor," Linda shouted, but the judge held up a hand, silencing her. "Ms. Foster," the judge said, his voice cold, "I believe you've made your case clear." And now, Ms. Dalton's lawyer has made his. "I'll be reviewing the new evidence and issuing my verdict." The gavel came down with a sharp crack. Court adjourned. Sarah could barely breathe as the weight of it all settled on her. She'd done it. They'd done it. She had fought back, not just for herself, but for every family that Linda had tried to hurt. Max had been her first step, but this was the victory she'd been working toward. As she stood, her knees wobbled, but a surge of adrenaline kept her standing tall. She turned to her lawyer, who was already shaking his head, muttering a quiet, "Well done." But it was Linda's reaction that made Sarah's heart race. As she walked past the table, Linda turned to face her, her expression twisted in pure, unrestrained hatred. "This isn't over," Linda hissed under her breath. "You've only won today, but I will destroy you. This neighborhood will never be yours." Sarah didn't flinch. "You can't destroy what's already been built, Linda," she replied, her voice firm. "This is just the beginning." As Sarah walked out of the courtroom, her heart surged with victory. But there was something else, too, a quiet, lingering threat in the back of her mind. She didn't know what Linda would do next, but she was ready. Max was by her side, and Jacob was waiting at home, his world made a little brighter by the victory she'd fought for. No matter what came next, they would face it together.